A crowded estate sale photo is uploaded to Facebook. Most people scrolling past that image saw nothing but old furniture and strangers. But one woman in Charlotte, North Carolina, stopped cold. In the far back, half hidden behind a bookshelf, was a man's face. He was older now, thinner, but his posture, his jawline, even the notch on his ear, unmistakable. 5 years earlier, that same man had been declared dead. His truck was found engulfed in flames on Interstate 40, just outside Old Fort, North Carolina. The coroner signed off. The insurance check was issued. His wife buried him in her heart and tried to move on. And now? Here he was, alive, laughing in the background of a stranger's photograph. She had no way of knowing it yet, but she wasn't the only one. She was the 5th woman who thought she had buried him. In the next 2 hours, we will retrace that entire path. The marriages, the staged deaths, the missing women, and the single moment in Lake Charles when a .38 revolver ended his run. This is not rumor. These are the dates, times, and documents that prove how one man lived 5 lives and left 5 wives grieving for husbands who never died. Aaliyah Mercer had spent her life building stability. At 47, she had a career most people dreamed of, running her own real estate agency in Charlotte, North Carolina. Her days were structured, her money carefully managed, and her circle small but loyal. She wasn't the kind of woman who rushed into love. She had seen too much, worked too hard, and knew that trust wasn't given. It was earned. On a warm June evening in 2014, at a charity gala downtown, she met Khalil Vaughn. He was 52, a luxury home developer who knew exactly how to carry himself in a room. Tall, well-dressed, with the kind of confidence that made people turn toward him without knowing why. He was attentive in conversation, asking about her work, her goals, her family. In a world full of shallow introductions, he seemed different. Weeks turned into months. They went to dinners, attended church together, and took evening walks through the city. He noticed small details about her, remembered things she had mentioned in passing, and spoke about building a future, not just for himself, but for them. On September 5th, 2015, just after 8 o'clock in the evening, Khalil proposed to her at Freedom Park. The lake shimmered under the lights, friends standing nearby to witness the moment. He promised her love, stability, and a life they could build together. She believed him. They married the following spring, April 2nd, 2016, in a small courthouse ceremony. Friends said they looked perfect together. 2 accomplished people ready to start their next chapter. A month later, Khalil insisted on increasing his life insurance to $680,000, naming Aaliyah as the sole beneficiary. He framed it as a gesture of love and responsibility. If something happened to him, she would never have to worry. 6 months later, everything changed. October 3rd, 2016. At 5:18 in the evening, Khalil texted Aaliyah to say he was heading to Asheville to meet a supplier. At 7:51, a traffic camera captured his truck heading east on I-40. At 9:42, a 911 call reported a pickup truck on fire near mile marker 69, just outside Old Fort. When first responders arrived at 9:50, the flames had already gutted the vehicle. The VIN plates matched Khalil's truck. Inside, what was left of human remains was unrecognizable. 3 days later, dental records confirmed the identity as Khalil Vaughn. There was no body for Aaliyah to see, No funeral. Just the explanation that the fire had made viewing impossible. On December 2nd, at 11:05 in the morning, the life insurance company issued the payout. $680,000. Enough to pay off her mortgage and give her a cushion for the future. But as the weeks passed, the comfort of financial security did nothing to quiet the questions in her mind. Questions about a fire so hot it left nothing to bury. Questions about a case closed so quickly it felt like no one wanted to look any closer. And she couldn't shake the feeling that something about her husband's death didn't add up. 4 months after Khalil's death, Aaliyah's life had started to settle into a new routine. She was still working, still managing her agency, still coming home to a house that now felt far too quiet. Most days she moved through the motions without thinking. The grief was there, heavy, but it was becoming something she could carry. Then, one January morning in 2017, she got an email from her bank. A charge had been flagged on Khalil's old credit account, $208.55, a convenience store in Mobile, Alabama. It made no sense. Khalil had never set foot in Alabama. She called the bank immediately. The representative told her it was likely a case of identity theft. Nothing unusual. The account would be frozen. The charge investigated, and she didn't need to worry. She told herself the same thing. It was just a mistake. But less than a month later, another alert came in. This time, $498.20 at a department store in Jackson, Mississippi. Aaliyah stared at the statement for a long time. Mississippi. That was 2 states west of where Khalil had supposedly died. In March it happened again. $312.90 at a hotel in Tallahassee, Florida, and then a gas station in Louisiana. Every new charge felt like a cold hand tightening around her. The amounts weren't random. They were small enough to avoid raising alarms, but spaced just enough to move along a route heading south and west from North Carolina. She contacted the police. They told her the same thing the bank had. Identity theft is common after a death. Someone had probably found his information and was exploiting it. It wasn't unusual, they said. It wasn't worth reopening anything. But Aaliyah didn't buy it. She had lived with Khalil. She knew his patterns, his spending habits, the way he timed his transactions. And whoever was using his name now, they were moving like him. Staying in one place, just long enough to make it look normal, then sliding quietly to the next. The case remained closed. No one wanted to dig deeper, but in the back of her mind, a thought had taken root, one she couldn't push away. What if Khalil wasn't gone at all? 5 years had passed since the night of the fire. Adalia had tried everything to rebuild her life. She kept her business running, surrounded herself with work, and avoided the empty spaces in her home that still reminded her of Khalil. Friends encouraged her to date, to move on, but every attempt ended the same. She would pull back before it got serious. Something in her heart still clung to the past, not out of love, but because the way it ended never made sense. Then, on Sunday, October 10th, 2021, at 4:18 in the afternoon, she was scrolling through Facebook. She wasn't looking for anything in particular, just killing time, idly flipping through posts in a small group she'd joined for estate sales in the South. One photo stopped her thumb mid-scroll. It showed the inside of a home somewhere in Louisiana, furniture pushed into rows, people browsing the items. Nothing about the scene should have meant anything to her, except for the man in the background. He was standing near a grandfather clock, half turned toward the camera. A navy baseball cap shadowed part of his face, but not enough to hide it from her. The shape of his jaw, the notch in his ear, the way he leaned slightly to the left when he stood. Her heart began to pound. It couldn't be. Khalil had been declared dead on October 3rd, 2016. She had signed the paperwork herself. The insurance had been paid. She had grieved, buried him in her heart, and tried to move on. But here he was. Older, thinner, alive. She took a screenshot immediately. She zoomed in until the pixels blurred, then zoomed out again, her eyes scanning every corner of the frame for proof she wasn't imagining it. The more she looked, the more certain she became. It was him. In that moment, the grief she'd carried for half a decade collapsed into something else entirely. A hard, cold certainty that she had been lied to. She didn't comment on the post. She didn't call anyone. She saved the image to 2 different drives, wrote down the time, date, and the name of the Facebook group, and then she started searching for anything that could tell her where that photo had been taken. She didn't know exactly what she would do with the truth once she found it, but she knew one thing. She was going to find him. Aaliyah didn't stop with the photo. For the next 3 nights, she barely slept. She tracked down the Facebook profile of the person who had posted it. She combed through the comments until she found a location: Lake Charles, Louisiana. She mapped the street names mentioned in passing. Slowly, she narrowed it down to a quiet stretch on the edge of town. But before confronting him, she wanted more. Proof. She started running his name through old real estate databases, business filings, and public records. That's when she found something she wasn't prepared for. Her husband had been married before. Not once, but 4 times. And every one of those marriages ended the same way. The first was in 2004, in Jackson, Mississippi. Her name was Loretta Gaines. 2 years later, his truck supposedly went off the road in a storm. No remains were recovered. Loretta was listed as the beneficiary on a life insurance policy. She vanished from public record in 2008. The second was in Memphis, Tennessee. Tiana Brooks, married in 2008. He disappeared in 2011 during what was reported as a boating accident near the Arkansas border. No body. Insurance payout issued. Tiana survived, but she lost her home and most of her savings. The third was in Savannah, Georgia. Monique Jordan, married in 2012. In 2013, a warehouse fire was said to have killed him. Identification came from dental records alone. Monique was reported missing in 2015. The fourth was in Little Rock, Arkansas. Sharice Ellington, married in 2014. Separated a year later. He drained their joint accounts and left. She never saw him again. But she kept something. A small blue ledger filled with company names, bank routing numbers, and aliases. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Quick romance. Sudden marriage. A life insurance policy. An unexpected accident. No viewable remains. An insurance payout. And then he was gone. Aaliyah sat at her kitchen table, the names written out in a neat list beside her coffee cup. 2 still alive. 2 missing without a trace. She realized she hadn't been unlucky. She hadn't been the victim of a one-time tragedy. She had been part of an operation. A routine. A system this man had perfected over nearly 2 decades. And somewhere in Lake Charles, Louisiana, that system was still running. October 14th, 2021. The sun was gone, and the heavy Louisiana air clung to everything it touched. Aaliyah had been parked down the street for almost an hour, watching the yellow frame farmhouse from a distance. Lights glowed in the windows. A dog barked somewhere in the dark. She had memorized his routine over the last 2 days. Around 7 o'clock, he would step outside with a glass in his hand. Sometimes alone. Sometimes with the woman who lived there, younger, maybe in her early 30s, and a little boy who looked no older than 3. At 7:23, the screen door creaked open. Khalil stepped onto the porch. He leaned on the railing, same posture she'd seen 100 times before, only now there was no suit, no polished shoes, just jeans, a t-shirt, and a man who believed he was untouchable. Aaliyah got out of her car. The .38 revolver felt heavier in her hand than it had in the glove compartment. She walked up the gravel drive until he turned his head. For a split second his smile faltered. Then it came back, that same smirk she remembered. The one that used to charm her and now made her skin crawl. "Well," he said, almost laughing, "if it isn't the widow." She didn't answer. She kept walking. "You shouldn't be here," he added. "Nobody's gonna believe you." "I'm dead, remember?" He took a step forward, like he was daring her to close the distance. And that was the moment. The months of questions. The years of grief. The truth she'd carried alone since that Facebook photo. One shot. The sound cracked through the night, echoing off the trees. Khalil fell back onto the gravel, a look of shock frozen on his face. He tried to move, but his legs didn't respond. The bullet had struck his spine. Inside the house, the woman screamed. The little boy began to cry. Aaliyah didn't run. She stood where she was, the gun still at her side, until the flashing blue and red lights cut through the darkness. When the officers shouted for her to drop the weapon, she laid it gently on the ground and raised her hands. For the first time in 5 years, she felt like she was finally standing in the truth. The shooting made the local news within hours. By the next morning, Khalil was no longer just a man paralyzed in a small-town hospital. He was the center of a federal investigation. The Lake Charles police called in the FBI after running his prints. The match didn't come back to Khalil Turner. It came back to 4 other names spread across multiple states, each tied to a different marriage, a different insurance payout, and in 2 cases, a missing woman who had never been found. Agents descended on the hospital, securing his room and seizing his belongings. Inside a small black duffel bag, they found passports under 3 different identities, each with a different birth date, and over $12,000 in cash. From there, the investigation widened. Financial analysts traced dozens of bank accounts across state lines, each opened under an alias, and used for only a short period before being drained and abandoned. The total amount stolen over the years exceeded $3 million. But it wasn't just about money. In both the Georgia and Mississippi marriages, the wives had vanished without a trace shortly after Khalil's death. Their last known movements were tied directly to him. No remains had ever been found, but federal prosecutors now labeled those cases as suspicious deaths, and the possibility of homicide was on the table. During interrogation, Khalil gave nothing away. He refused to answer questions about the missing women. Instead, he mocked investigators, saying, if they were dumb enough to fall for it, that's on them. The trial drew national attention. Prosecutors laid out a timeline stretching nearly 20 years, a pattern of romance, marriage, insurance fraud, and disappearance. They brought in survivors from across multiple states, each telling the same story with different details. Charisse Ellington, the Arkansas wife who had kept his blue ledger, testified for hours. She handed over the notebook in court, its pages lined with handwritten notes in Khalil's own handwriting. Dates, amounts, aliases, and even crude maps marking locations tied to his accidents. In the end, the jury found him guilty on counts of mail fraud, wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and conspiracy. The homicide investigations remained open, but without bodies. Prosecutors held those charges back. The judge sentenced him to 27 years in federal prison, citing him as a calculated predator who weaponized love for profit. Aaliyah sat in the back row of the courtroom during sentencing. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply watched him be led away in shackles, his head held high like he had won something. For her, the victory wasn't in the prison term. It was in the fact that the truth was now public. The man who had buried her in grief had been unmasked for what he really was. On February 8, 2023, Khalil Turner was transferred from the Orleans Parish lockup to a federal penitentiary in Beaumont, Texas. His appeal was denied before it ever reached the bench. For the women who survived him, the sentencing was both a victory and a reminder of what could never be undone. Loretta Gaines and Charisse Ellington attended the hearing in person, standing side by side though they had never met before the investigation. Tiana Brooks, the Memphis wife, sent in a written statement. You didn't just steal our money. You stole years we can't get back. And you did it with a smile. The families of the missing women, Monique Jordan and Loretta Gaines, still had no graves to visit. The FBI promised the cases remained open, But years of deception had buried the truth under layers of false identities and erased records. Aaliyah was spared prison time. The judge acknowledged the years of manipulation, the emotional toll, and the fact that Khalil had provoked the confrontation that ended in him being paralyzed. She was sentenced to 18 months probation, ordered to attend counseling, and barred from owning a firearm. In an interview 6 months later, she said only one thing about her decision to confront him that night. "I didn't go there to kill him. I went there to make him see me. The real me, the one he left for dead." The bullet was just the only language he understood. The case became a cautionary tale on national talk shows, documentaries, and podcasts. Experts called it a marriage and death fraud cycle, a rare but devastating scheme in which love is used as a business model, and trust becomes the first casualty. But beyond the headlines and the courtroom victories, there was a deeper, quieter truth. Every victim carried scars that no sentence could erase. And that's where the question remains. How many more like Khalil Turner are out there right now, hiding behind new names, planning their next move? If you think you could never fall for something like this, think again. It starts with charm. It builds with trust. And by the time you see the truth, you're already standing over a grave, real or staged. If you value stories like this being told, so the next victim sees the warning signs before it's too late, make sure you subscribe and share this video. And in the comments tell us, would you confront someone who faked their death and stole years of your life, or would you walk away? Because somewhere right now, someone's deciding whether you will be their next widow,